Iain from RTO here. Welcome to another Marathon Wednesday, and today it is part 4 of the Gary Moore story. So we've finally really got up to his solo career. We've gone through Granny's Indian, Honest Indian, Granny's Intentions. We've done Skid Row, we've done Colosseum 2. Obviously he was in Thin Lizzy for a little while. He was in Thin Lizzy, of course, between 73, 74 and 77, 79, and has worked with Phil Lynott as well. The album that he was actually on as a full member was Black Rose, but he did do some work on Nightlife as well. So we're going to look at his solo albums, which were rock, sort of trancey stuff, and blues. And during his career he released 18. Sadly left us on the 6th of February 2011 in Spain. So all of a sudden, 58, gone. What a legend. I did get to see him a few times, so I'm quite happy. So let's have a look at these 18 albums. Now, apart from a couple, I like them all, because I'm a huge fan. So this was very difficult for me. The bottom two were easy, but it was where the rest would go. So here we go for a marathon on the Gary Moore solo stuff. So coming in at number 18, this is from 1999 and it's called A Different Beat. On here it's just Gary Moore doing the vocals, guitars, bass, drum and mixing. Roger King on keyboards and programming. Now that's the word you don't want to hear on Gary Moore. And Gary Husband on drums. First track on this one is called Go Home. Love the opening riff, and then in comes the drum machine and totally kiboshes it. Don't like it at all. Lost in Your Love starts off great. Gary Moore giving it large, and here we go. Drum beat. Rubbish, go away, we don't need that. Why Worry No More, probably one of the better tracks on here. But it's still got a bad drum beat. And then he does a version of Jimi Hendrix's Fire, worst version of the song I've ever heard. Then we get Surrender. Now this is the best track on there, even though it's got this drum machine. It's 9-minute great, and it's got some great guitar work from Gary as ever. I do like that one. House Full of Blues, rubbish, ruined by the drum machine at the start. I hate drum machines that go off at 5,000 miles an hour. Why? Ruins any record. Then we got Bring My Baby Back. Skip that track, it's rubbish. Can't Help Myself, I can't say anything good about it either. Fat Boy, it's not too bad. The drum machine actually fits with a song, but it's not a good song. We Want Love, nice bluesy track here. It's not too bad, even the drum machine fits. And the last track is Can't Help Myself. Replace the drum machine with a proper drummer, as I had one on here, and you'd probably get a good track. Last track on the theatre. Not the best thing that Gary put out in his career. The drum machine is atrocious. The guitar works alright, but it is a pretty poor album in my books, and it's one that I don't play very often. In fact, I think I've only ever played it about 4 times, and the last time I played it was when I started this ranking, just to see if I could find some love, and I couldn't. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 3 out of 10 just for Gary Moore's guitar work. Okay then, coming in at number 17, we go to the 11th now, and this was released in 1997, and it's Dark Days. We've got Gary Moore, of course, doing the guitars and vocals. Magnus finds keyboards and, guess what, programming. Gary Husband's on the drums. D. Lewis backing vocals. Phil Nichols on keyboards and programming. And Mr. Guy Pratt on the bass. One Good Reason is the first track. I like the concept of this. I love the start, the muffled track, and then it comes in strong. It's one of the better tracks on this album. Cold Wind Blows, got a catchy tune. The drum beat sounds alright, but it's a great vocal from Gary. It's one of them gutsy ones. I Have Found My Love in You. I don't like this track. Again, it's just spoiled by the programming, but it has got a good guitar solo in it, and I'll give it that. That is good. One Fine Day, my favourite track on this album. I love the guitar riffs in this. This is a proper Gary Moore track. Lots of face pulling on the guitar solos on this one, as Gary Moore's renowned for. Like Angels, it's okay in places. It's got the great Gary Moore riffs and licks, but it's the rest of the song that's a bit... Ugh. What Are We Here For? Yeah. It's not too bad, actually. Always There For You, more of this techno drum rubbish. Don't like that at all. Afraid of Tomorrow. Drum Machine isn't too bad on here. And then Where Do We Go Wrong? I don't mind this one. It's probably one of the best tracks on the album. A little bit much of a different beat, but not by much. It's a smidgen. It's got one or two tracks I don't mind on here. So I'll give this one an RTO ranking a 5 out of 10. Okay then, coming in at number 16, we go to the 7th album, released in 1989, and it's called After the War. Now, good album, but not as good as some of the others. So we got some good people on here. Gary Moore, Neil Carter on the keyboards and backing vocals, Bob Daisley on the bass, Cozy Powell's on the drums. Now, when I saw Gary Moore, one of the last times I saw him as a rock artist, it was Gary Moore, Neil Carter, Bob Daisley, and Eric Singer. So we got their guest appearances here by Don Airey, Lawrence Cottle on the bass on one of the tracks, Steve Piggott, Sequencer on Ready for Love, Charlie Morgan, he's got drums on After the War, Simon Phillips. Yes, he appears as well on drums on a couple of trips. Brian Downey does a little bit as well. Chris Thompson. Fender Child. Chris Thompson. Ozzy Osbourne. Andrew Aldrich and Sam Brown and Miriam Stockley. Now, Miriam Stockley has played with on Brian May, and Sam Brown is the daughter of Joe, of course. So, first track on here. It's called After the War. It's an okay track. It's just a typical Gary Moore rock. It's the last of the sort of trilogy of these rock albums he did for a little while. It's not too bad. Speak for Yourself. Great driving riffs. Solid guitar work from Gary. Living on Dreams. It's okay, but I wouldn't say it's brilliant. Then we have Lead Clones, which featured Mr. Ozzy Osbourne. I don't mind this one. It was all at the time that you'd got Kingdom Come and everyone said they were a lead clone, and this second favourite track on here, it's got a great guitar solo from Gary. Next track, Running with the Storm, just solid rock. It's nothing special. This Thing Called Love, great sort of riff in this. But yeah, the rest of the song was not very memorable for me. Then we get Ready for Love. Now, okay, this may be a bit poppy, but it's so catchy. I really like this. I love the backing vocals from Miriam and Sam on this. Then we get Blood of Emeralds. It's okay, but it sounds too much like Emerald. But I do like these sort of tracks. Okay, after this run of success of some good rock albums, this one seems to be a little bit flat. It's the most disappointing of them. It's got some good tracks on it, but a that sort of period of Gary Moore's thing, it's probably the weakest of these 80s albums. It's not a bad album, but it's one that there's only a few outstanding tracks on. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 6.5. Okay then, coming in at number 15, we've got one of the blues albums now. It's the 15th album, released in 2006, and it's called Old New Ballads Blues. Featured on here is Gary Moore on guitars, Don Airey again on keyboards, Jonathan Noyce, who plays a lot on these bluesy albums, and Darren Mooney, again a drummer that appears on quite a lot of the blues albums. So this opens up with a cover of an Elmore James song. You can't go wrong there. Done Somebody Wrong. As ever, Gary delivers a great version of this great blues song. Love it. Great track. Then we get a Willie Dixon number, recorded by Otis Rush. You Know My Love, brilliant track, and Gary does a killer version of it. Then we get one of Gary's own, Midnight Blues. It just sounds like an old blues song. Brilliant. Ain't Nobody. I like this track, one of my favourites off here. Some great guitar from Gary, one of his own tunes. And then we get my favourite on here. It's called Gonna Rain Today. One of my favourite blues tracks by Gary Moore. Just wonderful. That keyboard from Don really gives it some atmosphere. It's a nice gentle drum as well. It's superb. Then we do another Otis Rush cover, All Your Love, another great version. This does appear though on as a bonus track on the CD version. I've still got the blues as well. Good track. Then we get Flesh and Blood. It's alright. Cut it out. It's a little instrumental, sort of bombastic track from Gary. Lots of licks, riffs, solos, you name it's on there. No Reason to Cry. It's a good track, but it goes on far too long. Then we get an Albert King song, I Play the Blues. Now, Gary was big into Albert King, and it's a great version. Solid album, nothing wrong with it. Two of the tracks are a little bit long on here, but it's still a great blues album, and I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 6.6. Time for a little drink. Okay, coming in at number 14, we go to the 10th album now, 1995. Blues for Greeny. Now this is a tribute to Peter Green, guitarist and founder member of Fleetwood Mac. And the album was recorded using the same 1959 Les Paul standard to record the original tracks. Green loaned it and then sold it to Gary Moore after leaving Fleetwood Mac. So there you go. All the guitar solos are played on the same guitar that Peter Green used. That's fantastic. So on here we've got Gary Moore on the guitars, Tommy Eyre on keyboards, Nick Payton on the baritone saxophone, Nick Pentlow on the tenor sax, Andy Pyle on the bass, and Graham Walker did the drumming. The first track is If You Be My Baby. Love this track, always have. Gary does a fantastic version of it, and it's my favourite track on the album. Always has been one of my favourite Fleetwood Mac blues songs. Long Grey Mare, another great song. Gary does this justice, of course. Merry Go Round, it's just a great British blues track. Gary's on fire. I think it just helped when you play the same guitar that Peter played. I Loved Another Woman, sterling version of this song. Need Your Love So Bad, a brilliant version. You can't fault that at all. The Same Way, again brilliant. It's just Gary beefed it up a little bit. The Supernatural, just brilliant again. Drifting, they're just all great Peter Green tracks. Showbiz Blues, love the slide guitar on this, absolutely fantastic. Love It Burns, love the sax on this, it's got so richness. Looking for Somebody, it just shows what a great guitarist Gary was as a blues player, just like Peter Green. I think this is probably one of the best cover albums I've got. I play this a lot. I love Peter Green and I love Gary Moore, so it was a brilliant combination. There's so many good albums in this catalogue. That's why it's so low down, and I'll give this an RTO 7 of 7 out of 10 because it is fantastic. Okay, coming in at number 13 is the 17th and the final album that Gary Moore released during his lifetime. It came out just before he died in 2011. No, it didn't. I've put the wrong year. There's the year. There's the proper year. Silly Billy. So on here we've got Gary Moore on the vocals, guitar and harmonica, Pete Rees on the bass, Vic Martin on the keyboards, Otis Taylor plays banjo on Preacher Man Blues, Cassie Taylor backing vocals, and Sam Kelly drums. Bad for Your Baby's the first track. Love this track. Rocky blues guitar. Excellent stuff. Down the line. Now this is what I call heavy metal rockabilly. It's a great track. Got some great grooves in it. Umbrella Man. Solid track. Lots of good little rips and riffs from Gary. Holding On. The magenta bluesy sound. I love it when he does these sort of tracks. That eerie sort of sound. Walking Through the Park, which is written by McKinney Morganfield. Muddy Waters made this famous and he does a brilliant cover of it. I Love You More Than Ever Now. It's the longest track on here. It's a great version of the Blood, Sweat and Tears song. Of course, that's who made it first, and it's absolutely brilliant. Some great guitar work on there. Then we get Mojo Boogie, a cover of the J.B. Lenoir song from 1966. Gary does a sterling version of it. Then we get Someday Baby. It was done by, released by Sleepy John Estes in 1936. It's a long time ago, but Muddy Waters did a version of it, and Gary Moore just does an even better version of it. It's brilliant. Do You Ever Feel Lonely? Great B.B. King style track. Preacher Man Blues, my favourite. It's just a great bluesy groove. Love that track. Trouble Ain't Far Behind, one of the great gentle blues album tracks from Gary. I do consider this the last album from Gary Moore that he recorded, and when I do put this on I do give a little bit of sadness because this is the last thing that Gary put out while he was alive. I love this album and I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 7.1. Okay, then coming in at number 12 we have the 18th album, the posthumous album that was released in 2021, How Blue Can You Get? Prior to his death, Gary was working on a new Celtic rock album. And some of the songs will appear on a live album, Live in Montreux in 2010. But there were some additional tracks and recordings that he'd made. So this is why we've got this album, and thank you for ever put this out because it's just great. So it's got Gary Moore on it, Peter Rees, Vic Martin and Darren Mooney. First track is called I'm Tore Down. Once again, it's just a great version of a Freddie King song. Gary was so good at interpreting great blues songs. Just like Stepping Out, it's a Memphis Slim song, of course. Now Cream did a version of this, which is good, but Gary Moore does a great version of this. In My Dreams, that's a wonderful track. How Blue Can You Get, which is a great cover of B.B. King's song. So good. Gary just did it justice. Then we get Looking at Your Picture, a really gritty guitar riff in this, absolutely brilliant. Then we get Love Can Make a Fool of You, The bass line from Peter Rees in this is brilliant. It's just some... The drumming from Darren is brilliant. I do like that track. Then we get Done. It flicks up and down. Done Somebody Wrong. Another solid blues track from Gary. Living with the Blues. My favourite track on here. And this would be the last thing you'd ever hear Gary on an album. It's just a great thing that they found these recordings. It's nice to hear them, and it was lovely to hear some new songs 10 years after Gary had passed. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 7.3. Okay then, number 11, 16th album. Again, I didn't put the year in, so there's the year, and it's close as you get. The album reunited Gary Moore with Brian Downey, who played on this. So it's Gary Moore on the guitars and DeBurrow on Sundown, Brian Downey on the drums, Vic Martin on the keyboard, and the ever-present blues giant bass player Peter Rees. Got Martin Feltnam on harmonica as well. Now, first track on here is brilliant. It's called If the Devil Made Whiskey. Boy, is this good. Love the riffs on this. Absolutely belting track. Then we get Trouble at Home. This has got one of them haunting bass lines from Pete Rees. Fantastic little track. 30 Days. Chuck Berry for track. It's nice to see Gary doing the more obscure. Everyone does Bye Bye Johnny and Johnny Be Good. But, you know, I love it when people go and find these tracks that don't get as much play. And it's a great version of this track. Hard Times. Love this track. That chunky guitar start and the harmonica. Absolutely brilliant. And the drumming from Brian on this is terrific. My favourite track. And then we got Have You Heard? It's a John Mayall song. It's a brilliant version of it. John Mayall, sorry. Brilliant version of it. Eyesight to the Blind, a Sonny Boy Williamson number, and they do a great version of it. Evening, written by Roy Swain, but it's all remembered for Jimmy Witherspoon's version, and I think it's a fantastic version of this song. Nowhere Fast, just a great blues from Gary. It's very raw as well. Checking My Baby, Sonny Boy Williamson song again, belter. I Had a Dream from Gary Moore. It's a nice blues track. Love the sound on this. Sundown, which is a really old song from the 1940s. And Gary's version is brilliant. Once again, another solid Garrett blues album from Gary. Top drawer stuff. I love listening to his blues albums. Very hard to rank them because they're as good as each other. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 7.4. Okay then, we've reached the top 10 quintessential Gary Moore albums. So, starting off at number 10, we have the 14th album released in 2004, Power of the Blues. With Gary on this one, we've got Bob Daisley on the bass, Jim Watson on the keyboards, and Darren Mooney again on the drums. So the first track on this one is called The Power of the Blues. Great track. The riffs on this are just brilliant stuff. There's some great bass playing from the brilliant Bob Daisley. Fantastic bass player. Good track. And then we got Tell Me Woman. Gary's guitar work on this is fantastic. It's just great listening to it. Then we get a Otis Rush cover, I Can't Quit You Baby, written by Willie Dixon. Again, Gary delivers a great cover. That's Why I Play the Blues. This is my favourite track on here. I just love the mood, that rich keyboard. Some great Gary Moore riffs and face pulling, generally good stuff. Then we get a Howlin' Wolf cover, Illville, one of the best covers that Gary Moore ever did. Brilliant. Getaway Blues, another thumping bass line for Mr. Bob Daisley that drives this super track along. Then we get Memory Pain, which is a Percy Mayfield song. I love the Mayfield's version of it, but Gary really does this justice. Can't Find My Baby, classic bass line from Bob Daisley again, drives the song along. Torn Inside, which is very moody, atmospheric. Again, Bob Daisley really owns that track on the bass, really sets the tempo and the mood. And again, these blues albums are just solid. I like the mixture. You get some really good original Gary Moore tracks, and then he throws some great covers in again. And I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 7.5. More coffee, dearie me. Okay, then coming in at number 9. This is the 13th album, Back to the Blues. After them little trancey things, he went back to something we all love. So joining Gary this time on is we've got Vic Martin on the keyboards, Mr. Pete Rees on bass again, Darren Mooney again on drums, and we got the horns of Martin Drover on the trumpet, Frank Mead on tenor sax, Nick Payne on baritone, and Nick Pentlow on the tenor. So, enough of the blues. My favourite opening track of all the blues albums that Gary did. It's an absolute belter. It's only one way to describe it. Blues, straight in, that real gets your feet going, all that sort of good stuff. Then we get Upset Me Baby, which of course is a BB King number. Brilliant. What can you say? he delivers a great cover. Cold Black Night, it's a groovy blues track with some great riffs on it. Gary is on fire. Then we get a brilliant version of Stormy Monday, which is a T-Bone Walker track. Now, this song is one of my favourite T-Bone Walker tracks, but Gary absolutely nails it. Brilliant. I Ain't Got You. Now, this is written by Calvin Carter. It's a classic bluesy song covered by some prominent people, like the Byrds have done this, the Yardbirds, sorry, have done this, Aerosmith, but I think Gary does the best version of it. It's absolutely brilliant. Picture of the Moon, it's one of these long blues tracks, some nice gentle guitar playing. I just love the Moody Blue song here, not the Moody Blues as in the band, but it's a Moody blues song. It's got lots of atmosphere. Then we get Looking Back, which is a Johnny Watson number, and this is a great version of it again. The Prophet, some wonderful guitar work again, absolutely blows you away. How Many Lies, the interplay between the keyboard playing is brilliant, and you got Darren and Pete having a bit of a whale of a time as well. They do. Everyone plays well on that one. And the last track is Drowning in Tears. Now this is one of the tracks. It's very rare that I don't get on with it, but it's got an incredible guitar solo on it. I think it just goes on a little bit too much. But after the last two dancey albums, Gary's back on form with this great blues album. It's certainly better that we've get Gary doing blues or rock than dance music. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 7.6. Okay, coming in at number 8. 9th album now. I think this was his second blues album. I think this is the tour I saw him on. I know I saw him a couple of times as a blues player. And it's called After Hours, and it was released in 1992. And it features B.B. King and Albert Collins. Along with Gary, we have Will Lee, Bob Daisley, Andy Pyle and Johnny B. Gaydon on bass, Graham Walker and Anton Fink, who jammed with Chris on the drums, Kiss, Tommy Iyer on the keyboards, Martin Drover on trumpet again, Frank Mead and Nick Pentlow on the saxes, the Memphis Horns, lots of people on this. And of course B.B. King, guitar and vocals on Since I Met You Baby, and Albert Collins on The Blues Is All Right, and guitar on Once in a Blue Mood. So Cold Day in Hell, love this track, brilliant, love the horns on that. Don't You Lie to Me, I Get Evil, song recorded back in 1940 by Tampa Red. Other people that have done this, of course, are Chuck Berry and Fats Domino, but Gary's version is brilliant. Story of the Blues, I love this, love the horns on it. The guitar playing on this is absolutely brilliant. Since I Met You Baby, featuring Mr. B.B. King, of course, absolutely brilliant. Separate Ways, I love the horns on this, it's a great track. Only Fool in Town, really groovy, funky, I love this track, great stuff. Then we get another John Mayall cover, it's a very short thing called Key to Love. It's one of my favourite little tracks on this album. Jumping at Shadows, first recorded by Duster Bennett in '68. Popular version of this is by Fleetwood Mac, of course, and they do a great live version of this, and this is a great track again, covered by Gary. The Blues Is All Right, the tune written by Milton Campbell, and it's a great duo between Albert and Gary. The Hurt Inside, gentle bluesy sort of really good. Nothing's the Same, it's got a bit of Spanish guitar on this which really works. And that was the last track. Definitely one of my favourite blues albums by Gary Moore. It's got Albert Collins and B.B. King on it. What more do you need to say about that album? And I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 7.7. Okay, coming in at number 7, we go to the debut album from 1979, Back on the Streets. Some great players on here. Gary Moore, of course, a certain Mr. Phil Lynott, Don Airey, certain John Mole from Colosseum 2. Don Airey was from Colosseum 2 at the time. Brian Downey's on here, and once again Mr. Simon Phillips. He gets everywhere. First track on this one, Back on the Streets, classic track from Gary. Simon Phillips drums on this. Got half of Colosseum 2 on this, it's just brilliant. Then we get Don't Believe a Word. Now this is the slower version, which I think's great. I love how this just builds up into a great track. Now I love this song full stop. Now what I like, I've got some recordings of this, live recordings, where it starts off as the slow version, and then Gary pumps it up into the version that Thin Lizzy done. I love this track. Fanatical Fascists. I just love this because this is one of the great early rock tracks from Gary. It's got all the elements of that he done from his previous work. It's brilliant. Then we get this instrumental called The Flight of the Snow Moose. Now I don't know if this is left over from Colosseum 2 days, but it's a jazz fusion stuff. It's absolutely amazing. The guitar work on here is brilliant. Then we get Hurricane, which is an instrumental. Still, I think this is bits left over from Colosseum 2, and it's still great. Song for Donna, It's All Right, but it's not one of my favourite tracks. Then we get this really cool track called What Would You Rather Be or a Wasp? It's an instrumental. It's sort of a Colosseum sort of track, so it gets the thumbs up for me on that one. And then we get one of the greatest songs that Gary and Phil ever wrote together, Parisian Walkways. Starts off with that boom, boom, boom. It's just absolutely amazing track, one of my favourite tracks. Lots of people try and play the guitar solo on this, and it's just not the same. I've seen Gary do this quite a lot, and it just brings the house down. Great album, great debut album. Anything that's got the classic Parisian Walkways is going to be good. Still got a little bit of that Colosseum feel to it, and I like this album. A lot of people don't like this album, but I love this album. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 8 out of 10. So coming in at number 6, we get the third album, 1983's Dirty Fingers. Although this was originally recorded in 1980, but was shelved in favour of the more radio-oriented G-Force, which we'll talk about more next week. So on here, joining Gary, we have got Charlie Hunn, who does lead vocals, Jimmy Bain, the great Jimmy Bain from Rainbow, Don Airey, the brilliant Tommy Aldridge. What a band lineup! Ooh. First track on here is the brilliant Hiroshima. The drumming from Top Me On, this is absolutely brilliant. The only thing that really lets it down is the vocal. Now, when Gary sings this, and I've heard Gary sing this, oh, it's much better. Great track. Then we get Dirty Fingers, which is basically, I've heard Gary do this live, it's just Gary giving it large on the guitar. Little thing. And then we get Bad News, which again is a brilliant track. Love the bass line from Jimmy Bain. The vocal from Charlie is much better, really good. Then we get a cover song, and it's the Animal song, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood. Really good version of it, I do like that. Then we get Run to Your Mama, which is a great rocker. Some great guitar work from Gary on that one. Then we get my favourite track, Nuclear Attack. Love the start of that keyboard sound. Some great dirty riffs from Gary, the best track on the album. Then we get Kidnapped, just a solid rock track. Tommy's drumming is electric. And it amazes me how he's still going strong today with Whitesnake. Absolutely terrific track. Then we get a great track, Really Gonna Rock You Tonight. Crowd pleaser, gets the crowd going. Then we get Lonely Nights, very solid rock track. Then we get Rest in Peace, the last track, great ballad. Some lovely guitar work on this. Now, I think this is a very underrated Gary Moore album. It's got some great musicians on here, and they play brilliantly. I mean, you get an album with Don Airey, Jimmy Bain, and Tommy Aldridge. Great rock band. Should have made more together. So I'm going to give this one an RTO ranking of 8.1. This is where it got tough, because these 5 albums are they do get played a lot. So coming in at number 5, we've got the second album from 1982, Corridors of Power. Joining Gary on here, Neil Murray. All the tracks are set 1. Tommy Eyre on keyboards. Ian Pace on drums. Backing vocals, John Sloman, who sang with Uriah Heep. Mo Foster plays on here as well. Jack Bruce, Don Airey, and drums, Bobby Choynoid on one track. What a lineup of musicians. First track, the brilliant Take Me For A Loser. The lovely, powerful drumming from Mr. Pace. Gary's riffs on top, brilliant. Then we get one of Gary's finest ballads. I love this track, Always Gonna Love You. Lots of great guitar work, power chords, the lots in there, it is brilliant. Then we get a cover, Wishing Well, of course it's a free song. Great cover, love this live, crowd love it live. Gonna Break My Heart Again, good track, solid guitar work. Falling in Love with You, great track. Again, some amazing guitar work from Gary. Then we get my favourite track on here, End of the World, killer track. From the start, that guitar stuff, that lots of wang bar, as my brother calls it. Killer riffs, dynamite vocal, Jack Bruce doing the backing vocals. It's just an amazing. Rocking Every Night, doom doom, boom, boom. Oh, always gets played. Well, when I saw him, he played this every time. The crowd used to go nuts. It's just a great rocker. Then we get another brilliant ballad, Cold Hearted. Some great riffs on this. A lovely bass line from Neil Murray on that. I Can't Wait Tomorrow, another great ballad. There are some great ballads on this album, and this is a great one to end the album. The keyboards are wonderful. This is one of Gary's classic rock albums. It's got, now I always say there's too many ballads on some albums, but there's a lot on this, but they're absolutely killers. Love this album, and I do play it a lot, so to give this an RTO ranking of 8.3. Okay then, coming in at number 4, we're going to 1984 now. Another great album, Victims of the Future. It was the first album that Neil Carter worked on it, and it was the last time we'd have Neil Murray, who rejoined Whitesnake, and Ian Paice, who rejoined Deep Purple. So it's Neil Carter, Neil Murray. Mo Foster does a bit of bass on here, so does Bob Daisley. Ian Paice doing some drums, and Bobby Choynoy do some drumming as well. And there's some additional backing vocals on a track by Mr. Noddy Holder. Yes. So side 1 opens up with the title track, Victims of the Future. Oh, what a track. What a track. Gentle. And then you get that. Second favourite track on this album. Absolutely killer. Then we get Teenage Idol, which is an absolute corking rock track. Loud, hard, brilliant. Then we get a cover of the Yardbirds' Shape of Things. Now this is the one that Noddy does the backing vocals on. It's a great version. I think this is heavier than the Yardbirds, of course, and it's brilliant live. Absolutely brilliant. Then we get Empty Rooms. Now there are 2 versions of this. This is the original sounding, which is more rawer. I love this track, and I think out of the 2 versions, this may be the version I prefer. It's just a classic track. And then we get my favourite Gary Moore song of all time, Murder in the Skies. About the song dedicated to the people that got shot out of the sky by the Russians. Korean airplane. The start of this, all that shredding. Now my brother is a great Gary Moore fan, and he learnt to play the whole of this, especially that opening bit. It's a killer. I remember when we saw them at Milton Keynes, my brother was in his element. He was down the front giving it large. It's just a great track. Watching him play this live is amazing, and the way he moves his hands up and down that fretboard is just amazing. Next track, All I Want. Love Neil Murray's bass line on it. Great melodic track. Hold On to Love. One of the tracks I'm not keen on of any of Gary Moore's stuff. It's not the best of track. Then we get The Law of the Jungle. Now this is a little bit different, but I love the solo on it. It's a great track. If it wasn't for one track on here, it'd probably be a contender for the #1 album, because I love this album, but there's just that one track that really lets it down. But it's a great album without a doubt. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 8.4. Okay, coming at number 3, the 8th album, released in 1990. It's his first blues album. Still Got the Blues. And with Gary on ears, Don Airey on the keyboards, Nicky Hopkins on the piano, Bob Daisley on the bass, Brian Downey on drums, Albert Collins features on the guitar on here, along with Albert King, Graham Walker on drums, Andy Pyle on bass. Moving On is the opener. Love this track. As little bluesy rock number, brilliant. Oh Pretty Woman, first performed by Albert King. And this is a great version of the song. Then we get one of my favourite songs, Walking by Myself. It's a Jimmy Rogers song, but this version's better. I've seen him do this live, and it's an absolute killer track live. Still Got the Blues. It's a good track. I've seen it, but it's overplayed. It's the one that, you know, blues albums, anything by Gary Moore, it's always this one. It's a great song though. Then my favourite song on here is the Texas Strut. It's a bit of a homage to the ZZ Top. It's got that Lagrange feel to it. It's a great track, my favourite track on here. Too Tired, it's a Johnny Watson track, and this features Albert Collins, and I've had the privilege of seeing Albert Collins and Gary Moore do this. It's absolutely brilliant. One of the best blues concerts I ever went to. Then we get King of the Blues, which is a tribute to Albert King, who was one of Gary's favourite players. It's a killer track. As the years go passing by. Now this is an old song from 1959. Fenton Robinson made it, recorded it, but Gary's version is much better, so much moodier. Then we get Midnight Blues. This is the best version of this song. Brilliant. Then this was the first Gary Moore's blues albums, and in my opinion it's the best one he ever done. The others are brilliant, but this was just top drawer, and it's still one of my favourite albums, so I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of 8.5. Okay then, coming in at number 2, 6th album from 1987, Wild Frontier. Quite a few songs about Ireland, and it's dedicated in memory of Phil Lynott, who died a year before this came out. The words for Philip are on the rear cover. So joining Gary Moore on here is Neil Carter on keyboards and backing vocals, and Bob Daisley on bass. Ronald Kerridge is drum programming. But we've got also Paddy Maloney on pipes, on the Elenian pipes on tracks 1, 7 and 8. Sean Keane and Martin Frey on the fiddles on the 1st and 8th track. This album opens up with Over the Hills and Far Away. Great track. Now, for something that's drum programmed, it is fantastic. Now, when I saw them play this, Eric Singer done it, and it's even better live. Nightwish have done a version of this. Now, I saw it on YouTube. Someone said a cover of Nightwish's Over the Hills and the Far Away, and I had to comment. I put, can I just remind you that this was written by Gary Moore in 1987, not Nightwish. Get your facts right, son. It's a great track, brilliant video to it, and it is my favourite track on the album. Second track, Wild Frontier, really good track. Now, there is a rumour that this track should have been recorded with Phil Lynott. It's all about Gary growing up in Ireland and Belfast. It's a brilliant song. It's got a great guitar solo. Then we get a track called Take a Little Time. I love this. It's a great rocker. The bit I love on this is that middle bit when you get that. They take off all the effects and you get that ding, ding, ding. It's such, gives the atmosphere before it goes into an incredible solo. Then we get a cover of a track called The Loner, and it was recorded by Cozy Powell. It was written by Max Middleton and Gary Moore back in the days. I don't know if they wrote this while they was in Colosseum or not, but it's a great track. Now, Gary Moore played on the original, but this has got more of a Celtic feel, and it's off Over the Top, if you want to know which album it's on. But it's a great track, and they're both great versions, but this is a more Celtic version. Okay, next track is another cover. Friday on My Mind, the Easy Beats, George Young, Angus and Malcolm's older brother, and Harry Vanda. A great version of this Easy Beats song. I'm going to be quite honest, I think this is a better version of it. Great track. Then we get Strangers in the Darkness, one of the moody songs on the air. It's a great track. It's got atmosphere, and I love Neil Carter's keyboards on this. Then we get Thunder Rising. Considering this is done on a drum machine, it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, it sounds great live as well. It's got some great tracks. And the last track is Johnny Boy, very Celtic, bit like Danny Boy, but this is Johnny Boy. It's Celtic, it's quite nice, and I do like it. Okay, for an album that hasn't got a drummer on it and has been programmed on a drum machine, it's done properly. It just doesn't spoil this album one little bit. I played this to death when it came out. I saw him on this tour, which was incredible. First time I'd ever seen, no, it's the second time I'd seen Gary Moore, and I love this album, so I'm going to give it an RTO ranking of 8.6. So my number one album, and it's been my number one album since the day it come out, really. An album I played to death, and I still play this to death. It's the fifth album from 1985, and it is Run for Cover. Joining Gary on here, some great names. Glenn Hughes on bass on some of the tracks. Phil Lynott's on here. Andy Richards does the keyboards. Neil Carter does. Don Airey does. Bob Daisley appears on here as well. Gary Ferguson does. Gary and Charlie Morgan does the drums as well. Paul Thompson. James Barton sampled some drums, and Keith Morrell do some backing vocals. Opens up with the brilliant Run for Cover. I love the start of this, that sample sound, and then it comes in, bang, the great drum from Gary Ferguson, Bob Daisley's bass line, some great riffs, brilliant. Reach for the Sky, absolutely killer track. Fine performance by Glenn Hughes on this. Now this is at the stage of Glenn's life that he was having lots of issues, but he gave a sterling performance on this. Glenn Hughes has got one of the greatest voices in rock. Brilliant. Then we get a cover. It's a Grand Slam song, Military Man, written by Phil Lynott, Lawrence Archer and Mark Stanway, and it's a great version of this. Phil sings on this. If you've heard the original, it's brilliant. This is my favourite song on here. It's just brilliant. Having Gary's guitar work. I mean, Lawrence Archer is a great guitarist, but Gary just makes it even better. It's a brilliant track. Empty Rooms, again, the remix version of it. There's too much keyboard on it, and it's not as good. Then we get, of course, the classic Out in the Fields. Great vocal between Phil and Gary. Big hit for them. One of the last songs we'd ever hear Phil on. Then we get Nothing to Lose. Absolutely great track. Opening driving riff from Gary. Glenn Hughes sings on this as well. It's absolutely wonderful. Once in a Lifetime. It's got a killer guitar work on it. The track's a bit weak, but the killer guitar. And then we have got one of my favourite tracks, and this is one I'm going to put in the playlist for you. All Messed Up. Great vocal between Gary and Glenn. It's absolutely killer. Probably my third favourite track ever by Gary Moore. The crowd love it. We used to sing this, you know, all messed up. It's just a great rocker. Listen to Your Heartbeat. Now this is the track that shouldn't be here. It's 280s. What were you doing, Gary? The only good thing about it is the guitar solo. It's just the blip on the album. Okay, apart from the last track, which is a pile of pants, every track on here is a killer track. It still reminds me of my favourite album, regardless of that last track, because at the end of All Messed Up, all I do is take the needle off, or sometimes I've got it on my pod, I just stop. Considering this was done in the mid-80s, where the production started to get a bit more intricate and smooth, I think there's none of that on here. They've used the technology, but it still rocks. So I'm going to give this an RTO ranking of a 9 out of 10. So there we go. It was a long one today, but I just love talking about Gary Moore. I think you may notice that. So that's part 4. Next week's the last part. And we're going to look at some other work that Gary done, some collaborations. Because I wanted to do another album that I've already covered as in the classic one-off albums. So I needed to do this one again because it is brilliant. So that's next week. We'll be back tomorrow though. We've got a Battle of the Debuts, and what have we got for you tomorrow? Well, we're going to do a bit of new metal. 2 bands that I don't know much about, so I thought, okay, throw myself in at the deep end. So we're going to look at Slipknot and Linkin Park. And tomorrow, Pick and Mix is a trip down memory lane. So we're going to be looking at the top 10 singles in the UK on the 20th of April 1973. All it leaves me to do is say, have a good day. If you're new to this, go and check out the rest of the stuff. There's plenty on there for everybody, something for everybody. And I will see you all tomorrow. Bye for now.